Part 2 of this slideshow is specifically about the concept of concision, which we've brought up a little bit before in part 1 of the slideshow as well. So here's a definition of what we mean by concision or being concise, and essentially means we're trying to get to the point quickly. And as this slide indicates, we will be able to be more concise when we're able to be more precise, when we choose the right word and we're able to convey the information in a very straightforward fashion because we understand what we want to say clearly. So here's an example of what we're talking about. This is a little bit humorous. This particular statement is not particularly concise. It's a single sentence, but it's got a lot of words in it. The wording is kind of awkward. It's got long words in it. So I think we can clearly say this is not concise. How could we say this more concisely? A rolling stone gathers no moss. Now this is a bit of an exaggeration for effect, but this is what we're talking about. Cutting through all the fluff and keeping the stuff, keeping the important meaning of what we have. So there are some particular points to help us write more concisely. First of all, you have to be clear about the main piece of information that you're trying to convey. If you don't know what that main point or purpose is, it'll be hard for you to keep it and to cut away the things that don't fit. You have to be clear on what your audience needs to know. So the main point or purpose is what you want to do. But you also have to think about how the audience is going to use this information and what they need to know to use the information. And you don't want to lose that either. There may be facts that need to be emphasized, and there may be things that you can cut because they're frankly too much information from the standpoint of either your main purpose or what the audience needs. And there are relationships between the facts or among the facts that you are conveying that you will want to keep. It's not important, you don't want to just strip away relationships and only present facts. Part of the purpose of your document is to convey these relationships. So there are a lot of little tips and tricks that help, generally speaking, writers to be more concise. For example, avoiding things like I think, I feel, it seems, in my opinion. If you're writing, the reader's going to assume these are your thoughts, feelings, opinions, etc. So just say the thing that you want to say. Just get to the point quickly. But another good tip is to remember to try to use verbs rather than nouns. Use something, don't find a utilization for it. And also, in general, technical communication tries to phrase things positively in terms of what people should do or what you want to see happen, rather than in terms of what they shouldn't do or what you don't want to see happen. It helps readers understand things more quickly. So the next few slides are an example of how we might practice concision. This particular slide is multiple sentences, and if you were trying to render this perhaps in a single sentence, the first thing you'd want to think about is what is the main piece of information the writer is trying to convey here? What is the writer's main point or purpose? So when you read through this, you see in a couple places where the writer kind of alludes to that, especially in the opening and closing. The reason I want to work for your company, and at the end, I want to be one of those people in your company. So we could boil this writer's main point or purpose down to something as short as hire me, but let's not get that concise. Let's try to keep a little bit more context than that. But we don't want to lose the main point or the purpose, so we're going to make sure we identify that. This slide shows in blue highlighted some of the key ideas that we might identify from the original statement. So I've highlighted the last sentence, the last part of that, where the person says that he or she wants to be hired, essentially. And then I've highlighted or used blue to indicate some of the reasons the person suggests that he or she wants to be hired. Some of the other things are just reiterations of some of these blue points. So we're kind of just trimming down, you know, a little bit of the awkward, you know, the reason I want to, that doesn't get to the point quickly. I get the feeling that doesn't get to the point quickly. So we're kind of trimming away those bits and just keeping here in the blue the key ideas. Then we can strip away all the things that weren't part of the main point. But even here, where we've gotten it down to 3 sentences, we could probably be a little bit more concise. There is a little bit of maybe repetition in the first and the second sentence. So we could probably combine some related ideas. Now we've done a little more combining and rearranging and gotten everything down at last to a single sentence. Now, this is not the only way that we could have restated this information in a single sentence. The point isn't that there's one perfect way to say this. The point is just to demonstrate how you can take a longer document and through applying some of the techniques that are discussed in this slideshow, strip things away down to the most essential elements and be, in that manner, more concise. Can something be too concise? Absolutely. As I suggested, simply hire me would probably be a little too concise. But specifically, if you take too much out in your editing process and what you're trying to say no longer makes sense, or the reader can no longer figure out what its point was or what your purpose was, or if you've taken out so much information that you've twisted things and somehow made things misleading, then you have become too concise. So we are trying to find a balance. In Project 3, you're going to be doing something very much like the example I went through over the past few slides. You're going to be given 5 short paragraphs that you're going to need to condense each down to 1 or 2 sentences. Now, you won't have a lot of context, so sometimes that'll be a little challenging. Nonetheless, you'll be able to follow the method demonstrated here in the slideshow to help you do this. In each of these little paragraphs, you'll first want to identify the main purpose or the main point of the information. First of all, you won't want to lose that. Whatever you end up with, whatever sentence or 2 you end up with at the end of your process, you'll want to have kept the main point or purpose. But also identifying the main point or purpose helps you to know what you can trim away, because things that don't support that main point or purpose can be gotten rid of. You'll want to consider what the audience really needs to know, or what might be TMI for the audience. So sometimes there's just more information than is really relevant, and you can get rid of it. Sometimes you can combine things that are repeated. Maybe the original source uses 2 verbs where you can just use 1 verb. Maybe you can combine things into a list. Maybe you can delete stuff that really is just totally beside the point of the whole selection. But you will want to make sure to keep, or if necessary, add short pieces of information that convey the relationships between the facts and ideas that you're presenting. So you'll want to practice a method very much like illustrated on the slideshow. One of the things that you will want to make sure you do in completing Project 3 is to be aware that there are 5 examples. Sometimes the 5th one somehow likes to get on to another page, and students sometimes miss it, so make sure you do all 5. And when you type your revised passage, do each revision underneath the original version. So it'll be the original version of the first example, then your version. The original version of the second example, then your version. Original version of the third example, then your version, so on and so forth. And in each case, only use 1 or 2 sentences. So here are some tips. Don't misrepresent the original information. If you somehow change the meaning or twist it, you will lose points. Make sure that you retain the main point or purpose of each statement. If you lose that, you will lose points. Do not use more than 2 sentences. If you have 3 or 4 sentences in your version, you will lose points. I'm sorry to sound negative, but I'm just laying it out there for you, okay? You also want to make sure that you proofread your work so that your writing is fluent, so that it's grammatical, and so that you've gotten rid of problems like passive voice or repetition, or some of the things that we talked about in the first half of this lecture. This week you have, in addition to Project 3, Discussion 1 due. Discussion 1 is a graded discussion, 25 points, and you will need to go to the discussion forum in Blackboard Learn, and first you'll want to download the reading selection. So there'll be a post that I've posted that says reading selections, and you'll want to download and read the document that's attached there, and then you'll want to follow the instructions in Blackboard Learn for the Discussion 1 assignment. And it specifies how many words your discussion will need to be. You will also want to organize your discussion into paragraphs, and you will want to use your best writing behavior. If you have questions about anything in Discussion 1, or if you have questions about Project 3 as well, you can post to the questions forum and ask. The earlier in the week you ask questions, the better. I should stress that Discussion 1 is not optional. Discussion 1 is graded. It is due this week. It and Project 3 will be subject to late penalties, 10% per day late penalties if they are late. This is not a situation where you can wait and do the discussions at the end of the semester. It is due this week. For next week, you'll have 2 chapters to read, chapters 3 and 16. Chapter 3 focuses on persuasion, and chapter 16 focuses on job application materials, and we'll be discussing in particular resumes and cover letters. And one last thing before I go, there is a document that I posted in the samples folder that illustrates Concision. It has an example of a longer sequence and shows how it can be rewritten in a single sentence. That's something that you can refer to as another model for your work in Project 3. If you got any questions about anything, don't forget to post to the questions forum. Catch you next week.